Hello, everybody. This is Free to Play Shroom or F2P Shroom here from Aimon 846. Me and some of the other players on the official Discord decided that it'd be a fun idea to start a new server together on Aimon. This included players from EU and Aimon. However, it's honestly been pretty fun, and what's been great about it is the several creators. Um, Both official and just people who on their free time make guides. Um, and that includes like Leroy and myself. I know Truss and Com Schizo and some others, but Leroy and myself, for instance, are the Pal Tamer guides or some of them. And we were kind of interested in being able to progress the early game and play with the PAL classes in the early game, trying to see the viability both in PvP and PvE for the early and middle game. So this was a great way to do that just because when those classes came out, myself and him and many other players were already deep into the game, so in the end game, and trying to give advice to someone in the early game who has completely different resources, completely different skills, pals, level of pals, um, amount of feathers, etc., is always pretty difficult just because we aren't in the exact same circumstances that y'all are in. So this guide is going to be completely free to play. Obviously, if you're a spender, you could very easily adjust it to try um, incorporating event items or a greater amount of resources per day. But the early game for any class, honestly, if you are free to play, is a lot of it's RNG based. What do you get from your pals, your pal tickets? What do you get from your skill tickets? Um, if there's weddings, for instance, what are you getting from those gift boxes? What are you getting from the 5 daily spins, et cetera, et cetera? And then obviously when star cards open, you have your star array with your different star heroes. This is going to be RNG based about which ones you get, and even if you get any, because they're pretty low drop rate. Um, Relics, which relics you get in which order, pretty RNG based, et cetera, et cetera, and your gear, obviously. So I'm going to try to make this moderately quick, but still give a decently in-depth guide about what I did and some changes that you could do, or if you have different RNG based encounters or circumstances, kind of the adjustments you can make, and just try to keep pushing forward the best you can. So first off, let's just go over the class. You start off at level 1 and you're the Shroomy, you get to level 15, you're the Adventurer. That's the same for every class. Now at level 30, you choose to be the Spirit Channeler, just because oh, the Spirit Channeler is your Pal Tamer class or your Pal class. So, choosing that at level 30 is going to give you one extra Pal slot and it's going to give you increased Pal attack speed and some ignore evasion. The ignore evasion really isn't as important. Now, as a Necro, the build that I'm going to be showing you, which is this bottom track, is the Skeleton Mage into the Spirit Shepherd, into the Necromaster, into the Supreme Spirit. Um, the You don't have the built-in complete ignore evasion that the Beastmaster has, like this track. So this track with the Tamer of Beasts active skill, you get PAL's ignore enemy evasion for 10%. Um, Whereas if you go the bottom route, so that's your Tamer route, if you go more of your Supreme Spirit, which is your Necro route, you don't get that in your Wilting Souls. You get this HP-based damage on PAL combos and PAL basic attacks. So just a completely different way to build it. But the ignore evasion comes into help there because in the later PvP and later PvE, you can run into some issues if opponents are highly stacking evasion or you do not have enough ignore evasion on your pals. Then, and that's level 30, and it's the same. Then at level 50, you have another um, class specialization. So you choose the Beast Tamer route or you choose the Skeleton Mage route. Now, honestly, if you want my honest opinion, the Beast Tamer route is probably your better, faster, stronger route. Um, this is you gotta be your top one is more of your damage dealing one when it comes to the out of these two. So your Beast Tamer is pretty much gonna have the capacity to have the higher damage output, especially in small burst shots. So as you start to optimize, or if you're trying to optimize your damage output, Beast Tamer has the better ability for just a higher um, PAL crit damage, especially with less optimization versus your Skeleton Mage. So one of the reasons I say that is at level 50, your third skill that you unlock is this increased PAL crit by 25%. This is really useful just due to the simple fact that because you're constantly changing gear in the early game, you're really not going to have very high developed PAL crit rate. You know, you're going to get 5% from the Relic. mm, You might get some from different items you have or different, skills you're eventually going to get, but you really aren't going to have it as well defined or developed on your gear. And even if you did, let's say, have a 10 out of 10 on PAL crit, in the early rarity of gears, it's only going to give 1 to 2%. So if you have all 10 pieces of gear with 1% or 2%, you're only going to have 10% to 20% PAL crit rate. Not very viable, especially 10%. But, if you have the 10 to 20%, then you have the PAL crit, you are the beast tamer, so you have the 25% PAL crit rate. And then you use the 5% extra from the relic that gives the PAL crit rate. You're going to start being able to stack how much PAL crit rate you have, especially at an early stage. So this is probably your better, quicker route, especially if you're a whale or you're really trying to compete for like a top position. Necro, little different. So your skeleton mage at level 50, its ability isn't to enhance the PAL deploy effects. This basically means, the easiest way to conceptualize this is, let's say you have your yellow deer. On any other class, the yellow deer has 10% damage res. As a necro or as a spirit mage, you're a skeleton mage, you get 12% because it's a 20% increase on the original value. Now, basically, what this means is your yellow deer is equivalent to other classes' orange deer. So, if you want to think about it, it's the equivalent of needing one less rarity to have the same level of deploy effect, but um, your damage output from those pals is going to be less, and your crit rate ability is going to be less, and everything else. So I would say it's nice, but it's not nearly as impactful as the 25% flat pal crit rate and the increased pal crit damage, just because you're likely to not be building pal crit damage at this point in the slightest. You're working on your attack stat, you're working somewhat on your pal damage stat, not really pal crit. Um, And then as you keep progressing, you have level 70. So I got past that one, and you gain one extra effect based on the first PAL's race in the lineup. So if you want a quick overview of these, I'll run through them for the early game. Beast Hive Mind, the gaining 10% is great because you're likely to have low attack stat, and attack is where all your damage is based off of. So being able to stack 10% extra attack is never a bad thing. Beast Dance, the gaining 10% PAL attack speed. I'd say this one isn't bad, but it's not going to be as impactful as the other ones, especially in the earlier game. You're really going to want the um, gain attack from the Beast Hive Mind, or if you scroll down, there's the Battle Pact, which is the other one I highly recommend. You gain 10% PAL crit rate based off of if you have one of these. So your dragon, that could be your treasure dragon, it could be your pink dragon, or your mecha dragon. If you're a spender, you're likely to have the eggplant or the moon hare. Eventually, if you get the lizard, that's probably what I'm going to use for the extra PAL damage and the PAL ignore evasion. But the pink pals, especially in the earlier game, they're great for the damage multiplier. And then as your lower rarity pals start to level up, they fall off. So that's when, you might not want the lizard in that spot until very, very later game when you're starting to level up the pink lizard to a high level and his damage multiplier is again at a more viable or, yeah, I guess viable range. Because if it's too low, even if you want the PAL, is basically like giving up one part of your damage output for the deploy effect, which on these PAL classes isn't the best because you really want the damage output, unless you're like my other guide build, which is a sustain build, so you're not worrying about the damage output. In that case, the deploy effect is way more important. You want the higher rarity deer because it's going to give you more damage res, even if it's going to do less damage, because you don't care about doing damage as a tank. You just want to be as beefy and sustain filled as possible. So, for completion's sake, I'm very close. I'm level 97, but level 100 is the Necromaster, and at the Necromaster at level 100, you unlock this last one. So it's basically you get this extra effect based off of if you have a certain amount, like two or three of a species of pals. So this one is if it's in the first slot. This one is if it's a certain number of the same species, and it could be any slot. Um, for this one, I'd say your Snowy Knight is more endgame. I'd say the First Enlightenment is a great one, and it's really easy to use, especially with the pals listed. There's a lot of them, especially a lot of the ones buffed by the relics. Same thing with the Adorable Nature, which is going to give character damage res. So I don't think those are ever bad decisions to have. And then Whining Palm is also great because, First Enlightenment gives you more energy regen, which a lot of your damage is going to be based off of your skills triggering at the same time, so that you have these huge damage multipliers to go along with your natural damage. Um, then Adorable Nature is especially great in short burst fights. If you're trying to make a high damage sort of early game PvP or so. You don't have Blitz Assault, or you might be late to get Blitz Assault. Having higher damage res kind of can make up for the fact that you don't have, Blitz Assault giving immunity, or, you might have lower defense. You might not have as much HP because you're putting so much into attack. So this is nice. And again, a lot of these are like the snail and the deer are buffed by the relics. So I'd say the Adorable Nature and the First Enlightenment are really easy to get with the relics. Same with Whining Palms and Quad Terrain, but I'd say these are more of if you're focusing on the PAL crit or the PAL combo through the relic. And I'd say Quad Terrain is better in PV. Key if you want to have an extra bit of sustain because you're going to be using, a panda likely, and you might be using counter regen. So then you might be using the dog or the toothpaste to have higher counter percent. You might be using the floral panda to have the even higher built-in regen. So these aren't terrible um, either. And then the precise echo goes along with one of the ones that I didn't show. I'll show in a moment from the fourth effect, which basically helps you get more PAL ignore evasion. So, you have the 10% built into the class. You can get 20 more percent, which I'll show in a second, from the fourth ability, from the fourth class ability. And then the fifth class ability, you have the ability to convert your player, so yourself, um, ignore evasion stat into PAL ignore evasion if you're using either two or three of the PALs listed. So the lizard, the moon hare, the black eye. Um, the black eye and the lizard itself naturally give PAL ignore evasion, which is great. So if you are going to be um, trying to stack ignore evasion. Maybe you're in a later game PvP and you're fighting an evasion based build. You're really going to want PAL ignore evasion. And in this case, you're probably going to want the black eye, which sadly is a paid event PAL, or the moon hare, again, sadly a paid event PAL. But the lizard is not. And the lizard gives some ignore evasion, and then you can get some more from here. So the anemia bound gives the 20%, like I was saying, synergizes quite well with the precise echo. Traveled less is basically for you having multiple event pals because it's pals not belonging to the race above. So most of those are going to be your event pals that were released, after. A lot of these are the original pals, and then you have some added ones like Gingerbread Man. For reference, Spectre in this first enlightenment is hydroslime. So don't get confused on there. And this one honestly wouldn't be a terrible one either. But again, it's event pals, so if you're free to play like me, you're not really gonna have access to it unless there's a collab event or certain events have built-in event pals, which would allow you to use the traveled less or the anemia bound as shown here. And then the other two I forgot to show here were Wild Call. It's regen. It's not a flat 6% regen. That would be ridiculous. It's like 6% to the end. So imagine if you have 1% regen, you're multiplying that by 1.06, it becomes 1.06% regen. It seems like it's either that or it's 6% bonus worked as like a panda. So a very terrible panda. I think it's the former. I think it's the 6% to the end of your regen stat. So it's still very small, especially when you're taking into account the fact that there's a 30% PvP regen, like a 70% PvP reduction. So it's only 30% as strong as the stat implies. Um, and the 6% really isn't going to offset that, but it definitely, if you want to be a full tank, is not a terrible idea in the late game, just not something early game. And then territory patrol, very similar thing. Defense really isn't something you worry about as much in the early game. You start to worry about that way more in the late game. Some people in the late game still don't really focus it as much, which, you know, I don't think behooves them, but I also don't think overly stacking defense is overly great unless you're like me and want to be a full defense tilt, which is always a very weird build. So those are the effect previews going through the class. Now I'll really quickly just go through the skills, the pals, the relics, and everything else. So skills and pals, like I said, really going to be based on what you're able to draw. This thorn thicket is always really good for slowing down the mobs. One of the things I noticed with Necro is, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but sometimes I'm able to kill, sometimes I lose to time, and then sometimes I'm just straight killed. It what I've seen, it depends on the boss that's presented, and then also the skills and the pals and everything else that I'm using. So, I mean, obviously that makes sense, but I like to be lazy and I like to try to use a one fit all, especially in the earlier game when I'm just trying to leave my phone on so you can push through levels. So, what I've been using is this. Now, before I had these reds, I was using some of the yellows. I think Easy Breezy or Dorian Bomb are always pretty good for PvE. Take It Slow is really good for PvP. And then obviously if you want more damage, use something like like these oranges, you have Meteor Fall, Slime Bomb, Coin Bomb, etc. Once you start pushing into your reds and your pinks, that's really when you're starting to pick up everything. I highly suggest trying to push into getting, one of all the skills, and one of all the pals, but one of all the skills is really important. Clone is a game changer, Blitz is a game changer. I'd say Blade Pierce is kind of meh, but it does a really high damage multiplier for the early game. Um, and it's also never a terrible skill to pick up, especially for the later game. But, these event skills are something you're going to worry about through the various shops. So, not too much to worry about. But the ones that you want to have your eyes on are these three. So, realistically, these four, you're going to want Dragonic Resistance at one point. But I'd say that's later game. I'd say worry about these three. And the order you should likely do it is Ancestral Will and Wing and Dream at the same time, then go for 100 Slashes and Dragonic Resonance. So Wing and Dream is you get that from your family brawl shop. If you go to the exchange here, you need 12,000 points, but then you get Winged Dream. Once you have Winged Dream, I would say start focusing on Dragonic Resonance. Leveling the skill isn't as important. I mean, it's definitely nice, but not something you need to 100% focus on. Don't fall for the trap that a lot of people do, which is they buy these. These are the shards. These are used to upgrade the skill. You buy the 12,000 version of the skill, then you buy these down here so that you can upgrade the skill. If you just buy the shards, you're going to be able to upgrade it later on, but you're not going to be able to use the shard as a skill. So I would not try to make that mistake unless you want to wait like an extra brawl, two brawls, maybe a full week to get that. Um, And then, like I said, focusing on Dragonic resistance or resonance. Um, then I'd say, um, we don't have it yet, but you're gonna have this cross server, family showdown. It looks like a portal type picture, and that's gonna be where you get Winged Dream, and Ancestral Will. So this one, Ancestral Will, and 100 Slashes. Those are really good for, you want the PAL crit, and the Winged Dream gives the PAL combo, but then the 100 Slashes is going to give you attack stat based on your HP. Your HP is always higher than your attack. So getting a nice attack boost based on your HP is very useful. Um, and then for the later game, like I said, Draconic Resonance is something that's nicer, especially as Necro plays a very good endgame tank. So this is a good tank-based skill. Um, Now into pals. Um, like I said, I think this really depends on A, the RNG of what you're getting, and then B, the RNG of the relics you're getting. Because like Tamer and Pal classes are going to be extremely dependent on the relics. So you have, your relics here. I'd say, what do you hope to get? You hope to get the priest mask first, which is what I got, very luckily. And then you're probably hoping to get the amber slime here, and either the magic box, the blessed dew, or the arrow bamboo. How the order that I got these in was I got the amber slime, and then I also got the blessed dew and the arrow bamboo, I think a day or two ago. And then the day after, I think so 2 days ago, I got this. One day ago, I got this. And I do want to test the differences, but if you look at the difference in level, obviously I've been stacking my blessed dew just to try to give my cactuses a good amount of viability. Um, Kind of preparing for the fact that when I become level 100, having two or three cactuses, if I have two cactuses, let me show you that again. If I have two cactuses, here it is. If I have two cactuses, I'm going to gain 10% POW combo. If I have 3% cactus or three cactuses, I'm going to get 15% combo. So, and that's to all your pals. So that's definitely not a bad thing at all. If you're trying to have a higher pal combo rate in the early game, usually you don't have it as developed. And using this blessed dew to try to increase the viability of your cactuses now, or cacti. Now, for I guess laziness sake, or why I went into this route, was I got the red cactus, the orange cactus. Every cactus was like my first pal of that rarity. Additionally, I got this relic was like my second or third relic. So maybe fourth. So I was really early to get it, and that's also why it's so high leveled, is I put a couple levels into it and then just spammed one or two search for the relics. um, Same with this one up here, but to a less degree, even though I think you could have a high amount of viability using a high level amber snail and a high level magic box. That's something I do use on my main for some of the wonky builds I use when I try to do a lot of damage, but I don't want to change my souls and everything else. I do like a damage resistance based Necro that tries to have extremely high attack and defense. Um, but yeah, I think, I know a lot of people who go with this one because of the fact that your pal crit rate is really low and pandas are really useful, and this allows you to build pal crit damage early. So I know a lot of people who really like this one. I didn't pick it just because I got this, like I said, late, and I also didn't get the orange and red pandas for actually like a pretty decent while. So I was a bit slow with getting the higher rarity panda pals, and I didn't get the relic, so it wasn't really in my ballpark. I really couldn't do anything about that. Like I said, you're up to you're up to the fate of whatever RNG gives you. So and then the magic box really similar. Instead of focusing PAL combo, PAL crit, you could be focusing the base PAL damage multiplier and then trying to build PAL combo, PAL crit through your gear and everything else. Definitely not a terrible decision either. And again, cat and deer and nail and hydra sprite all work really well with a lot of the uh, class set bonuses. The Whirlwind Feather, I'd say, is also a really good one. I'd say it's more later on. It's something, if you really have high developed damage, you have high PAL combo, high PAL crit rate, high PAL crit damage, high PAL damage, high attack damage. Then going for PAL attack speed is something that's great if you're trying to just do a shit ton of burst damage. Alternatively, you could be trying to focus on max HP based damage, which is another thing Sprite could do. So you don't worry about any of the things I just said. You don't worry about attack or PAL combo damage, PAL crit damage. You just simply worry about trying to do as many basic attacks and combos as you can during your class skill, because when you awaken, it's going to have that max HP based damage. Again, something way later down the line, but just trying to give you some ideas to think about. But the sprite feather, I'd say, is more of your later thing. Now, if it is the first thing you get, obviously use it. But there are going to be other alternatives that at least I would think are much better. And when I tried using it at level 6 versus like a similar level 6 here, wasn't nearly as good. Now, that's also because my attack isn't high, my PAL damage isn't high, PAL crit damage isn't high, etc., etc. So that will start to change as things go on, and obviously I can update this guide with subsequent weeks, especially as back accessory gets released into this new server and artifact runes and everything else to show kind of where I'm moving and how I've adjusted with the different materials I've gotten over the weeks. Warning, it's not going to be fully min-maxed. I'm a university student. I don't have the time to do that, but I will try my best to have it be as decent as possible. A, because I enjoy having a decently min-maxed account. I enjoy not getting stuck. But B, I know, if you're going to be looking for a guide, you're probably A, lost, or B, trying to have the greatest advantage you can. So me fasting, for lack of better words, isn't the best showing of what a class is capable of doing. If you're wondering about some of the other relics here, top left, definitely pal crit rate. If you want, really early on, you could do something else, but I'd say pal crit rate is something you kind of just put it on and leave it, forget about it, and then as you're developing, it'll feel nicer when you're like, ooh, everything's starting to actually seem like it's doing more damage. Um, The Flame Book is going to give you attack, super nice for the early game. Alternatively, you can use the Stone Writ Tomb. I'd say this is more later on, end game, especially in PvP. Not so much as in PvE, even though it gives the basic attack damage res, which is honestly not terrible. But in PvE, you have some other things. You have the Healing Book, you have the, like, basically gives you a Blitz Shield, immunity for damage book, and then the boss damage book. Now, when it comes to leveling, you want to level these all equally, but the ones that do actually increase in their relic equip effect are the Amber Snail, the Whirlwind Feather, the Blessed Dew, the Arrow Bamboo, the Magic Box, and the Metamorphic Crystal. Um, the other ones in this one do not. Not mistaken, the other ones there do not. Same here and same up here. So I would not level the rest of them up, like try pushing super high levels because they're not going to increase. Oh, and um these are going to increase the Gilded Eggshell, the Thundercaller Kite, and the Blue Snowflake. They're going to increase the amount of damage they do. My apologies. So basically, all of these increase, all of your middle left in your top right, all of these increase besides the Dragon Weave Circlet, and then pretty much none of the rest of them increase. Now, eventually, you're gonna get when you get all the relics, you're gonna have the middle one, and that's gonna increase just like your top right and your middle left. But for right now, I don't have those. This is luck of the draw. I didn't get anything else. Energy statue is probably the one I wanted least besides stellar statue. I really like this one, but because I have none of the skills to make it work, it's useless. So this is probably the only one I'd want less at this current second, but will become very viable, once I get those skills, probably the end of this week. Probably at least getting Actually, I don't know when Showdown is open, but I'll try. I'll probably take a week or two of Showdown to get Ancestral Will, and then in the bottom right here, there's one that increases the speed regen of Winged Dream, which is great for and Dragonic Resonance, but Winged Dream for basically trying to have as the increased PAL combo as constant as you can throughout the match. So that one's definitely good down here, but I don't have it unlocked, so I can't really show it. But take my word for it. Um, the middle, the bottom left, I would say the time statue is great. Disarmed and smoke bomb are something that are really great in both PvP and PvE. So if you want a lazy build, that's a great option. Once you get the slime bomb, that's really when your PAL damage starts to become far more noticeable. So I'd say the crystal statue is not bad at all, just for increasing that slime bomb. Like there are some people who use the slime bomb in their tamer builds, until they're level basically 170, 180. So I would say that it's not a bad thing at all, depending on how you build your build, what do you focus on, attack more, PAL damage more, etc. But this crystal statue, not a bad idea at all for just increasing that attack damage. I'd say your time statue is a mix of increasing your sustain with the increased disarm, and then increased damage with the smoke bomb being longer. And then you have the same thing with Stellar Statue, which is going to extend the duration of 100 slashes, so your HP to attack skill that I showed earlier, and Ancestral Will, which is your PAL crit skill. So it's going to give all your PALs PAL crit rate. So extending this is great. Again, doesn't level, don't focus on the level. All of these should be equally leveled. If you had all these level 10, and then if you had the ones that you used in the middle left and the top right as level 50, 60, 100, that would be optimal, you know, because you want even levels to have the best overall owned effect you can get right here. So the base HP, attack, and defense. But you really don't want to be wasting your resources increasing something that's not going to give you any benefit, whereas you could have put 10, 15, 20 more levels into your amber slime or your blessed dew or your cardboard or your magic box and had an actual benefit shown more than just a stat gain of HP, attack, or defense. um For gear, I don't know if I've gone over this yet, which is kind of wild because I should have gone over that first. My apologies. But gear, I like PAL combo, PAL crit for the early game. As you start, progressing into the Auroras, Eternal, even somewhat maybe into Supreme, but I would say probably not. Stay away from it. Regen, I would say regen's going to really work at your Eternal, maybe the end of Auroras, or maybe you can get away with it slightly, but I would say stick to damage until you get the Eternal gear. That's more of your end game, and when everything's actually set up and true builds can be, use to their maximal instead of kind of earlier on when damage kind of just blows out any other option. So because of that, I'd say PAL combo, PAL crit. I'm sure you could do some wonky builds if you wanted with some skill crit, PAL combo, etc. Maybe for some PvP. The PAL combo, PAL crit is definitely not a bad option. How I try to progress as quickly as possible. I put on the filter. I put on PAL crit any, PAL combo any. I put the quality as my lowest rarity outfit, so or piece of gear. So I have immortal here, I have immortal everywhere actually. So because of this, I would put it right now at immortal. But let's say I get one piece of supreme, I'm not going to change it until all of them are supreme. That way, I could be as lazy as possible, but still see all the potential upgrades that have a PAL attribute included. Obviously, if you get a gear like this that has PAL combo, PAL crit, that's the best you can get, but you're going to be constantly replacing these gears so quickly, especially, the first couple rarities. You're basically, normal, unique, well, rare. You're getting a new piece of gear every single lamp pole almost. Then when you get into mythic, epic, that's really when it starts to slow down a little bit. And then past legendary and immortal is when it becomes a much, much slower and realistic or true to the end game. In which, you're getting a couple of upgrades per day. If that, you really need to focus on trying to min max as many lamps per day if you want to be stacking your level as high as possible and everything else. So I left that filter on. I let it go, basically trying to get as high and quick of a level as possible. Probably throwing away a bunch of good gears, especially in the first day or two. I wouldn't say do this. I would say when you get to the red, the pink, so the legendary, the immortal, the supreme rarity, that's probably when you want to do this. But I was doing it since normal, unique, as soon as the rarity opened, I mean the filter opened, I put it on. Um, and then what can I think of next? Um, I would say save your Clockwinders for Rush, it's pretty helpful. I was able to, I think, get through one or two pages of the Clockwinder Rush, and it got me to here. I had to use pink gems, bear in mind. So the pink gems, I was just saving them. I was doing a bunch of skill ticket pulls, I wanted to get all the pink skills, and then I wanted to just stack as many, like just open as many PAL tickets as possible. But I realized that Clockwinder Rush was around or Mount Rush was around the corner. So I saved my pink gems and then I splurged them on this rush. I think I saved for a day or two. It wasn't really that needed, but I also got a bit blessed with the simulator, which gives you every 4 hours pink gems, but also in these breakthrough journeys, you get a bunch of pink gems. So this was a saving grace almost because I used way too many on skill draws and was still able to not be too hurt by it by the fact that I was given a bunch of diamonds or pink gems from the event that was currently ongoing. Um, Avian is obviously so random. It's so RNG based. You have the eggs, you have the breeding. I would say, speak with the people on your server, try to find what people have for all of us in our server because we all know each other from the official Discord, and we've spoken and fought each other 1,000 times, if not more. We all, have pretty good communication skills, and we've also done this a million times. So everyone was like, "Oh, share what avians you have. If you get something with, a unique ability, share it." And because of that, everyone's just been constantly sharing. I know a lot of the tamers and myself have been putting as many of these POW-based ones on here, just trying to share as much as we can, and then tinker and move forward as we can. I know there's surprisingly a lot of tamers and necros on this server. If you're wondering what I think is best, I think, if you got a good PAL attack speed or the dragon for reducing the opponent damage res. Let me see if I can find it. Right here, removing the opponent damage res. If you got probably that one is really good. This one wouldn't be bad at all. The puppy gauge, just getting a flat 50% PAL attack speed. But since at least I don't have the PAL attack speed from tech, and I don't have a lot of the event items increasing PAL attack speed, I would only really go with the puppy gaze, or if I went with this smart assistant, it would have to be after I leveled it a decent amount. Now, if you're wondering why I don't just go with the yogurts, like the yogurt Coca or the yogurt Champ, my pal crit, and probably you'll find yourself in a similar situation if you play Necro instead of Tamer. Your pal crit and pal combo aren't super high. So, and this Avian applies the buff to each pal independently. So you basically need your pals to have rather set up pal crit and pal combo for this Avian to work. However, when you do that, and as you start to level this Avian, it becomes a very, very viable option. Um, However, because I don't want to level an avian, I kind of want to just save my things. I did a level one dense cloud, any of the ones I had. And the one I used just gives me, at any level, level one, 100, it gives me the 25% energy regen. If I had the puppy gaze, it gives a similar thing where at level one or 100, it gives 50% pal attack speed. This would also be something I would think about, but I don't have any of those, nor do I think anyone is sharing any right now. So I went with the dense cloud just because in the early game, a lot of your damage from pals, from skills, and this kind of allows me to do both. I get the faster energy regen, which is getting my skills to pump out faster, so I do more damage based off my skills. But then also the skills that I'm using try to increase the damage that my pals do, which allows me to do more pal damage. Again, super RNG based. But good luck. Good luck, especially with these new ones. Um, this new update that has the workers, that just came out last night. There is even more avian passive affix to play around and try to obtain. Fun, fun. Everyone loves breeding. So I guess lastly is Star Array. I guess that's current. Oh, I guess and then Prayer Statue. Lastly, for on this page, you have Star Array. So RNG based, if you get something shielding, if you get Lamp Genie for just the straight stats, or is it Lamp Genie for the straight stats, that probably wouldn't be terrible. Um, this is a very common option, the Spirit Harbinger, for the extra PAL crit rate or the extra PAL combo rate, depending on where you use it. It's a very common option in the later game. And I think if I got it, I think I would definitely throw it on there. But I don't have any of these. So, and then, there's some of these that are great for their supports, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so like this one's not terrible. All pals gain 50% base crit damage, and then releasing the main passive skill grants all pals 2.5% of crit rate. So, you could have either more pal crit damage or more pal crit rate, depending on if you put it in the main skill or the support. And this could, synergize well with that lamp genie, like I showed you. Just really depends on what you get when you get it. If you buy the lamp genie pack, you can go right for that. If you get lucky and insta pull this, great. If you're like me and you get these, you work with what you got. Giving you defense, not great, but I'll take the developing skill. This is active. It's going to do, some skill damage, which again, at the beginning of the game, skill damage is a nice component of your damage. Um, it isn't great, but it's probably the best I have just because I could pair it with this. So, it's already stunning something, but it's the only other active thing I have. So I also have it stunning again. And then I use it with this rock so that it gives me a shield whenever I use that active. So I do a skill damage, I stun them for about a half second, and then I have a shield for 5 seconds, but it's only 5% of my max HP. So usually not the biggest shield, but a shield nonetheless, especially right as you stun them. It allows you to get a nice amount of use out of that shield. So yeah, that's what I'm using here. Alternatively, I could be using passives, and then I'd be using, for extra for more defense, and I'd be getting more I'll ignore evasion. But since it's so early and no one has like high evasion, this really isn't as necessary. I did debate it because in PvE I was noticing a couple, and I did use it for a little bit until I got the active things I'm currently using. But I did notice that some bosses were showing evasion when I try to hit them in PvE, and I was wondering if it was my player being evaded or if it was the POW themselves being evaded. So I had thrown on this Dome Watcher for a little bit, but I definitely realized I was able to go progress through the PvE much quicker and get stuck much less frequently by using this void guide with I don't know if the chrono sprite does anything. It seems like the overlaps of the stuns aren't doing anything, but it's really nice for the developing skill to get 5 extra clock winders. And then this is just giving me the shield and the nice little 2% parking coins. So as you see for the rest of these things, back accessory, day 18. This is souls, day 15. Don't have access. We don't have the artifact runes, so I can't show you what I'd progressed there, but it would be PAL damage. I'm trying to focus on PAL crit rate, maybe PAL damage in the sub effects. Um, as for mounts, if you're lucky enough to do rush, you're probably gonna want your where is it? The Hot Wheels, and then in the early game, also the Cloud is really good. Or is it the Cloud Drifter is a really good one for PvP, and even if you just want to be a high damage build, this Adapto Slime wouldn't be a terrible option for a pure free to play player. Um, but then obviously, if you get any of these event skins, they're pretty much going to be a good step up above the rest of them. This one isn't bad either. Definitely helps, especially if you're using the Nirvana Spore, which is something super late game, similarly with this Adapto Slime that I pointed out earlier, and both of which are in the Rush shop. So here. This one also wouldn't be bad for just getting more attack. Again, attack is one of the best things you could prioritize in the early game, if not the best thing. Um, As for Prayer Statue, it's pretty simple. I've been trying to go for full attack. I got stuck with some pal damage. I'm not complaining. It seems like it's actually pretty viable to use. Um, I should change it and go for the S and the SS. I think I have those unlocked. Oh, just S. So I should go for S and eventually SS, but I kind of want to stalk a little bit until I feel more comfortable splurging and I don't just get stuck with a really bad statue. But what I want to test, especially when I'm level 5 and I have set 2, I want to test a full global attack versus a full pal damage when I'm putting most of my upgrades, as I'll show them in the video, but most of them into attack and pal damage and seeing kind of what gives me more of an advantage both in PvP, both in PvE, maybe against different classes. There's a lot of players that seem to be low spender free to play level that it does seem like it should allow me to stress test the build or several different builds against other earlier middle game builds. Like, pre-blitz is going to be something to figure out and everything else. But yeah, I want to test PAL damage versus global attack. And obviously in the comments of this video or in the thread linking this video on the official Discord, I'll include kind of my findings. If I had to assume, it's probably going to take a week or two. I would trying to do updates as the content comes out, so every week, if not 2 weeks. But when I'm going to have enough prayer crops and when I'm going to have enough content to kind of show y'all a big change and kind of how I've been putting things forward is kind of how these are going to move forward. If you have any specifics, if you want to ask, of course, I'll try to get to as many of those as I can. For tech, Super simple attack. I didn't even finish the HP up here. I was saving for rush, and then as soon as rush started, I just hit the full blue side. I finished that, and since then I've just been pushing through to get this. I wanted the attack, the defense to get the PAL damage, and then I did one for the HP again, and now I'm pushing attack, and then eventually I'll push the defense just so I can get the PAL attack speed. Then I'll probably move into some of the quicker tech, so improved offline rewards, and then um, longer offline earning time, and then I'll probably move back into doing the HPs unless I really get hard stuck or find that I really need them. Um, these have changed. I'll make a separate video going over exactly what I did for the management system, but a quick overview of what I'm using in the early game. This is what I'm using, just the best of what I can use, trying to feed them to try to keep the same ones in and try to level them up. I want to see how do you get increased stars on them because it seems like they have star levels attached to the PAL's special skill. So, this guy's a water and he has these stars right here. So it seems like you could have the a better version of Snow General, and it seems like it's probably through either amount of time and use, or I'm assuming, XP gain via the same PAL. I know someone said they had theirs at level 11, so it might be like level 20, level 40, level 60 was someone's guess. Thank you, Leroy. Um, and I guess we'll test and see if it is level 20, 40, 60 for the increased stars and what the increased stars give. But quick overview, that's what I use. Um, Parking, basic mounts, put them in, forget about them. And then I think early on you should really be focusing on this. So, you get a nice amount of buffs through your ring. I forgot they moved it through your ring. And basically, when you get to these nicer rings, so, Devotion and Union of Hearts, etc., it's going to give you increased PAL base crit damage and then increased PAL ignore evasion, which are both super good to have without having to build anywhere else. So stacking your ring as high of level as you can, as early as you can, is a really smart decision, especially for the PAL classes. It does give a nice HP bonus, a nice attack bonus, and defense bonus that scale as you increase your affinity between your partner and you, and as you increase the level of the ring. Um, but the extra effect, like it says right there, no extra effects because it's level, the basic ring. But as you get to level 51, it becomes love and then devotion, increases your PAL stat. So super good. So I would suggest, if you go in here, you could see all of, how I just did that is you click on the host, you click for here it says bosom, and then you click tasks, and it'll show you all the ways you can gain affinity each day. You can gain 200 affinity between you and your partner, and then you could also, give them the milk teas and potentially give them these flowers, depending on what you have, to try to give them more. And then you could do weddings and everything else. Oh, and the new passion post as well. I think that's everything for the most part. Um, if you are a spender again, you can make very easy adjustments to incorporate event pals or event skills or event items, and it's going to very quickly and very largely increase the viability of the build, whether it's early, late, or middle game. Um, And if you have any questions about what would be best, again, I could always answer them in the comment section or on Discord. But I think that has been everything I've done so far. Trying to min max basically as much as possible. Um, Pushing skills, trying to get pink skills, and then pushing the rest into PALs. I'm currently saving my PAL tickets for the upcoming rush. So if you click the trophy up here and then you click the calendar, it'll show you the rush schedule. So we just finished Mount Rush. Now we're on Tech Rush for the whole week. And that was in between Mount Rush. But during the beginning of next week, we have PAL Rush. So the way that I think about this is, okay, I'll save my pals until, start of next week, most likely, and then splurge them just trying to get a couple of extra gems so I can get more pal and skill tickets. And then from that week, hopefully I'll have all the pink skills, and then I'll save until the next week and use them all on the skill rush. That's my current methodology. We have so many spenders and high spenders and former whales from Amen and EU. We also are on, a normal server. It's not like you make a private server. So there's regular players, regular whales, regular spenders, that rushes are going to be extremely competitive. So I know for the early game, for myself on this server, I'm not as concerned with the early game rushes. I kind of just want to get as many of the pages as I can do per day, per rush, trying to get as many hammers, gems, speed up tickets, etc. And then kind of focusing on the pages and trying to win rushes and get good placements, in the second month, third month, fourth month. Usually that's when activity starts to drop off a little bit. You could also save materials for a while, and a spender doesn't have as much of a massive advantage on you. Um, it's just a little easier as time goes on, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that's been everything. Um, Again, this has been free to play, and I hope y'all enjoy.